For centuries, vampires have existed beyond the reach of ordinary people, silently watching from the darkness. To most of the world, they are nothing more than myths and legends, stories told to frighten children. But behind the veil of normal society, a secret war rages on. A war fought in abandoned streets, dark alleys, and moonlit nights where only one side can survive. In this world, humans are not always the hunters. Sometimes, they are the prey. Our story follows Han Se-gun, an ordinary young man whose life changes forever in a single horrifying night. One moment he is living a normal life, surrounded by the people he loves. The next, everything is taken from him in a brutal act of violence carried out by creatures he never believed could exist. The massacre leaves him with nothing but pain, anger, and an overwhelming desire for revenge. While most people would break under such tragedy, Se-gun chooses a different path. Instead of running from the darkness, he decides to step into it. Driven by hatred and the need for justice, he enters a world hidden from ordinary eyes, a world filled with vampires, hunters, monsters, and deadly secrets. Along the way, he encounters powerful allies and terrifying enemies, each of whom will shape the person he becomes. But revenge is never simple. As Se-gun grows stronger and learns more about the supernatural world around him, he begins to realize that the line between hero and monster is far thinner than he once believed. Every battle pushes him closer to his goal, but it also forces him to confront difficult truths about humanity, power, and the cost of vengeance. Will he succeed in destroying the creatures responsible for his suffering, or will his obsession with revenge transform him into something just as dangerous as the monsters he hunts? Prepare yourself for a journey into a world where the moon illuminates not beauty, but bloodshed. A world where every shadow may hide a predator, and every choice carries a deadly price. Well, the summary of the story had already been told, so let me remind everyone that before diving in, don't forget to like and subscribe, while also sharing your thoughts in the comments, because even at the end of the world, engagement still matters. Now let's start from the very beginning in detail. Story kicks off under the moonless night. On that dark and silent night, the world's strongest hunter, Sylvester, arrived. Stepping out of his car, he gazed toward the base of the mountain, sensing that something was terribly wrong. Two men sit near a burning barrel inside an industrial area. One of them understands that the other is saying they brought in a new illegal drug, and learns that its name is psychedelic moon. The other man explains that the people who demanded illegal entry gave it to them instead of money, which leaves the listener confused. And one of the men asks if there are any more guests coming. A man steps forward and stops Sylvester, asking where he is from and then politely asking him to show his invitation. Sylvester responds by raising a gun close to the man's face, and indicating if this is what he means. In the next moment, he fired a bullet without any hesitation. Under the moonlight, Sylvester confirms that this is what he meant. Inside a club filled with red and blue lights, music equipment and a wide floor are shown as people gather around tables. A vampire's mouth twists into a sharp grin as his fangs show, and nearby a woman with headphones reacts, calling out in alarm. The vampire moves through the crowd and complains that they are killing the mood, then asks if there is nothing more exciting. He tells them to just pick something fun and play it hard, questioning why it is so difficult. He steps forward across the floor, followed by the woman reacting as the vampire states that if even that is difficult, there is no reason for them to endure hunger. The gate bursts open and a body collapses nearby. Someone reacts in shock and points out to look at their faces. Vampires with distorted expressions stand among the chaos. Sylvester stands framed in a doorway and remarks that it looks like they had some fun. For vampires, humans are nothing but prey, or toys. However, there were creatures that even such vampires feared, and we call them vampire hunters. One vampire demands to know who he is. Another vampire realizes that the man did not get an invitation as he rushes forward, but is struck down in an instant. Sylvester steps in calmly, expressing regret and saying it makes him sad. He states that he understands they are desperately trying to find traces of their parent, Jokyo. He continues that for the renowned Jokyo faction to fall so low as to conspire with a third-rate criminal gang is shameful. He asks what the deceased Jokyo would say if they saw this. Holding his weapon near his face, he wonders if they would not shed tears they had never shed before. A vampire clenches his jaw as recognition dawns. He states that it is him. Sylvester meets their gaze without reaction. The vampire realizes his identity and recalls the man as a priest expelled from the Vatican, the true demon hunter, Sylvester. The vampire declares that he will adorn the night with Sylvester's blood. Sylvester calmly responds that their guest service is quite terrible. In a blur of motion, bodies are flung aside as Sylvester advances through the hall. A vampire sneers and mocks him, asking if it is because he has no parents. In the beginning, the Lord made Adam from soil, and from Adam's bone made Eve. Death as the holy ceremony of returning to Eden. Sylvester stands amid flying bodies, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Sylvester stands amid the wreckage and states that he does not think there is any information he needs from these vampires. Even the thought of trying to kill him shows that the vampire is the most useless mongrel among mongrels. The vampire snaps back angrily, shouting for him to shut up as he lunges forward. Sylvester meets the charge head-on. The vampire twists his body midair and strikes again, claws flashing. Sylvester counters and knocks him aside, sending him crashing across the floor. The vampire's body slams down hard, debris scattering around him. Sylvester looks down at the fallen opponent and remarks that he can transform. The vampire launches another attack, swinging wildly. Sylvester cuts through the assault and strikes him cleanly, blood spraying as the blow lands. The vampire is sent flying once more and smashes into the ground. As dust settles around the broken floor, a vampire hunter complains and asks if Sylvester could not have held back a little. Bodies lie scattered across the bloodstained floor as Sylvester faces the hunter kneeling beside a fallen vampire. The hunter named as Jungjun warns that if Sylvester chops them up like this, there will not be much blood left to collect. Sylvester asks where Deokyeon is. Jungjun answers that he is filling in for him today. He then adds that it was true. The Jokyo faction had a connection with the Sangdong gang. He continues that having a hideout in a place like this makes it a good spawning sanctuary where countless lives can be harvested. Sylvester told him to stop whining and get back to work. The vampire's red eye sharpens as he reacts. Sylvester realizes something and notes that he finally found him. He turns and advances, weapon raised. He fires, and repeated shots strike the vampire's body, bursting blood as the impacts land. The vampire is blasted backward through the air, spinning violently as blood trails behind him. Outside of the industrial yard, a violent shock erupts through the yard as the vampire crashes through the structure, tearing it apart in a burst of force. The vampire sprints forward at high speed, blood streaking from its wounds as it flees. Jungjun notes that it ran very fast, and Sylvester asks if he can leave the cleanup to Jungjun. Jungjun suggests leaving the injured one alone since it will probably die soon. Anyway, Sylvester turns back coldly and warns that if Jungjun says something like that one more time, he will die by Sylvester's hand very soon. Jungjun laughs and says, Sylvester's jokes are quite extreme, but Sylvester asks if it sounds like a joke. Jungjun agrees to clean up to the best of his ability and tells Sylvester to leave it to him. Later, Jungjun mutters to himself about whether he should really be cleaning up. Sylvester stands alone by the water under the moonlit sky, breathing out slowly and thinking that things are getting complicated, realizing that the target has already lost his reason and is becoming a feral. Under the full moon, Sylvester walks away through the empty streets. Elsewhere, a group of bikers races through a tunnel at high speed as police cars chase them with sirens blaring. A police officer shouts at the bikers to slow down if they do not want to die. One of the bikers laughs loudly and tells them to try to kill them then. A biker leans forward on a motorcycle speeding through the rain, the headlight blazing. Tonight, someone shall become a sacrifice to the moonlit night. For this biker it was a life without any particular worries. A detached house with a garden, a father who runs a business and a mother who is a housewife, a model student older brother, and even a golden retriever named Joan of Arc. A bright flash cuts the scene. Bikers race through a tunnel at high speed, police cars chasing behind them. Compared to them, this biker had nothing he particularly wanted to do, and his grades were average. That was why. He always wanted to escape from his ordinary daily life. A woman riding on the back of a motorcycle asks why that guy keeps chasing them and how they are supposed to lose him. She shouts at a man named as Jung Young Jin, telling him not to say he cannot shake him off, complains about what he did by flipping him off and cursing him, and snaps at him to take it seriously. Jin yells for her to just stay still. Jin remains silent. The biker grips the handle tightly, and it becomes clear that because he broke the rules, he only needs to stick to the set path. The motorcycles speed down the road together. Jin shouts at Han Segeon, asking what he is doing and where he is going. Han Segeon's bike hits the edge and launches upward. The two riders watching cry out in shock. Han Segeon soars through the air. He continues riding at high speed. A rider calls out, asking if Han Segeon is running away by himself. Back then, for Han Segeon, riding was the only escape from a life soaked in inertia. Han Segeon arrives at a quiet place and walks forward alone. He wonders if Joan of Arc is quiet today. He goes up the stairs and checks the door, thinking she might be sleeping. He calls out that he is home. As he opens the door, he suddenly notices a strange smell. He realizes it is blood. In the dark entryway where the lights are out, a stench like rotting mackerel fills the air. He understands that clearly someone has entered their house. Holding a weapon, he calls out for his mom, his dad, and his brother. He asks if anyone is there. A large shadow looms behind him. The figure suddenly attacks, and Han Segeon swings his weapon upward while calling out Joan of Arc. A massive creature with bared teeth presses down on him. Han Segeon groans as he struggles and is thrown aside. He forces himself back up, gripping the weapon with both hands. The creature lunges again. Han Segeon wonders if that really is Joan of Arc. The sounds of repeated impacts fill the space. He realizes this cannot be happening, and fears that Joan of Arc might be what he thinks, and then knocks the creature down. Joan of Arc's image flashes in his mind. His attention snaps to the floor, where bodies lie motionless. He cries out in pain and collapses, choking and gagging, then starts vomiting just by the smell. He thinks of Joan of Arc and his parents, unable to understand what happened to their house. The sound of movement draws his attention upward, and he realizes it is still inside the house, on the second floor. Seeing a fallen baton, he doubts it will be enough, and remembers there was a shotgun kept in the study. He drags himself there and finds his brother badly injured. Standing before him, he realizes his brother was hit as well. Han Segeon apologizes weakly, struggling to speak. He tells his brother that if only he had come a little earlier, this might not have happened. Han Segeon grips the shotgun, shaken but resolute, and decides he will kill them all. He checks the weapon and notices there is still warmth left. He concludes that his brother used the gun while he fought. He wonders why the culprit did not take the gun. Holding the shotgun, he thinks that if it comes to this, they might believe he cannot kill them. He moves toward the stairs, and a thought follows that he should have realized it then. He goes down while gripping the gun. He thinks that, however, for his thoughts to reach that conclusion rationally is honestly close to impossible, because a bloodied foot steps onto the floor. He raises the shotgun as a sound rings out. He thinks that, in the first place, that thing was in existence outside of common sense. He feels no feelings or emotions bubbling up, and it feels like his mind comes to a complete halt. He gives an example of seeing a favorite celebrity in real life for the first time. Another example follows about hearing a lame joke, or when you see a beautiful landscape and right now, the figure stands at the top of the stairs facing him. Han Se-gyeon looks up, his face tense. He braces himself on the stairs and raises the shotgun. A sudden impact follows as the vampire rushes at him. The shotgun is knocked away as a white-furred vampire lunges forward with its mouth open. Han Se-gyeon is sent flying backward and crashes hard onto the floor, blood spreading beneath him. His hand scrapes against the ground as he struggles to move, and he thinks his shoulder feels like it popped out. The creature looms upright, towering over him as saliva drips from its mouth. He thinks that he could have run away, or called the police, or asked the people around for help, but when the situation actually struck, he could not think of doing any of that. Han Se-gyeon sits slumped against the wall, the shotgun resting loosely in his hands as blood pools beneath him. He does not know why he was like that, but back then, only one thought filled his mind: to kill that thing. The vampire lunges again, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Han Se-gyeon forces his body to move and fires. The blast erupts, sending sparks and shock through the air as the recoil twists his body. The vampire cuts his hand as the weapon flies from Han Se-gyeon's hands. His eyes widen as he hits the ground, breath knocked out of him. The vampire descends, towering over his fallen form, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it closes in. The vampire grabs him by the head and lifts him off the ground. His body hangs limply as blood drips between them. He realizes that he could not even take revenge properly. His thoughts list his dad, his mom, his brother, and Joan of Arc. The vampire approaches again, its glowing eyes fixed on him. He feels sorry for being this much weak. A gunshot rings out. The vampire's hand is struck, bursting apart as its body is thrown backward. It crashes down, blood spraying across the floor. The vampire convulses, struggling to rise again. A man steps forward saying the vampire finally went and committed it. He raises his gun and fires again. The vampire is struck and thrown backward. The vampire watches the man with cold-blooded eyes. The man himself, Sylvester, cuts the vampire and finishes him off colding, saying that if Han Se-gyeon was going to die, he should have gone alone quietly. Several bodies lie scattered on the ground as Sylvester stands among them holding a weapon, while Han Se-gyeon remains motionless. Sylvester walks toward Han Se-gyeon, who lies wounded on the floor. It is said that there is no one righteous, not even one, and that all people on earth are sinners. Sylvester stands over Han Se-gyeon and tells him to resent him. Sylvester's eyes are shown in silence, followed by a gun lying on the ground near Han Se-gyeon's hand. Han Se-gyeon struggling and bloodied, as Sylvester asks to let him ask one thing and questions whether the gun belongs to him. Sylvester remains silent as Han Se-gyeon lies bleeding on the floor. It is stated that Han Se-gyeon is too good to be killed outright, and that his life until now had been one without any particular worries. Whereas after some time a voice urgently calls out for a student from outside a building. Han Se-gyeon lies near a shotgun on the floor as the word student is shouted again. It is stated that maybe that was the reason, that Sylvester wanted to deviate just as much as others were ordinary. An officer kneels beside Han Se-gyeon and urgently asks if he is okay and if he can hear. He shouts that there is a survivor and calls for personnel to be sent over. Han Se-gyeon weakly calls out for his mother and father. He lies flat on the ground and murmured about his brother. People gather around him, and it is stated that his wish came true. On a TV, reports arrive that a week ago, there was an incident that caused quite a stir among the public. The news anchor reports on a mysterious case involving the death of an entire family, stating that the survivor possesses a shotgun. Another report asks whether the family was bitten by their pet dog, confirms that this is correct, and questions whether they really died from the dog's bite. The news anchor says that the production team said the survivor was holding a shotgun at the time of the incident. A blood-stained shotgun on the floor is shown as the reporter tells again that the survivor possesses a shotgun. He explains that attention is being paid to the fact that the survivor actually fired that gun. A student states that he knows the survivor's brother is pretty smart, suggests it could have been done out of jealousy, and Jin adds that the victim was known for riding a bike, but he was not a thug, and that there was something about him that felt off. A photographer raises a camera and takes pictures. Han Se-gyeon stands facing forward, thinking that he has never seen so many faces in his entire life. The reporters surround him as people ask what happened and urge him to say something. He thinks they demand an explanation, as if they entrusted something to him, and accuse him of shooting them for a reason, asking why he wanted to kill his family like that. It feels like they are trying to find something hidden, A reporter pleads for him to say something as a recorder is held out toward him. A sudden sense of shock is shown as grotesque blood-covered vampire that killed his entire family appears in his thought. Han Segyeon is asked what is wrong and whether this is what Han Segyeon wanted, saying that even while his family was being murdered, he was peacefully riding his bike. He thinks he deserves to be angry. Han Segyeon says no, then shouts that he said no. He runs down the street and it is stated that he ran away from something he does not even know. He cannot remember anything clearly, and that it might also be because he does not want to remember. Han Segyeon clenches his fist and cries while thinking that he did not want to believe that what he got himself into was real. When he finally woke up, the monster's body had already disappeared without a trace, and that the arm that was cut off was still intact. As he looks at his blood-stained hand, everything he went through that day was something that never truly existed, and that he forgot everything. His family's body appears in his thoughts, followed by the image of that monster, then another man. Therefore Han Segyeon, he had no choice but to leave the house. It is something other people would not believe, and that even so, he could not lock himself inside the house. Han Segyeon walks alone through a city street at night while people pass by around him. He thinks that the most painful memory he ever had was in that place and he has nowhere to go. Han Segyeon stands near his motorcycle thinking that there is nowhere for him to go, either inside or outside. He rides the motorcycle through the night. Han Segyeon stops and looks up, reacting in silence. Sylvester stands nearby as he thinks that this man was definitely someone. Han Segyeon suddenly rushes forward toward him. He turns and asks whether the man was at his house that night. Han Segyeon points at Sylvester and says that he was at their house, insisting that it was him. Han Segyeon raises his voice and says that it was the day the monster came. Sylvester tells him to be quiet and says that Han Segyeon goes around causing trouble for everyone, adding that he was told not to shout in the middle of the night. Han Segyeon asks who Sylvester is and what the monster was. Sylvester dismisses it and tells Han Segyeon to show how good his imagination is. Han Segyeon asks whether Sylvester is an exorcist. Sylvester replies that it is close enough. Han Segyeon asks what the monster he saw was, and then asks whether it was a vampire. Sylvester answers that it is correct. Han Segyeon reacts in shock. Sylvester says that now that it has come to this, he will get straight to the point and asks whether Han Segyeon drank vampire blood. Han Segyeon says that some of the monster's blood got on him when he shot it, and wonders if that means he turned into a vampire. Sylvester says it is possible if he did drink its blood. Han Segyeon looks at his arm and says that means this arm. Sylvester says no, and states that he was the one who stuck it back. Han Segyeon asks what Sylvester means by that nonsense, and Sylvester questions whether what he saw makes sense. Han Segyeon falls silent, then asks if there are many vampires out there. Sylvester says that whether there are or not is none of Han Segyeon's business, and tells him what he needs to do now is return to his normal life. Han Segyeon looks at him and asks whether Sylvester really thinks that is possible, saying that he lost everything, and asking how he is supposed to return to his normal life. Sylvester grabs Han Segyeon. Sylvester looks down at him and says that Han Segyeon thinks he is something special, then tells him to stop whining and says that he is not the only unfortunate one. Han Segyeon pauses, and quietly says, then. He asks what Sylvester wants him to do. Han Segyeon says that he saw the monster, and that it killed his family he saw with his own 2 eyes. Han Segyeon steps forward and asks how he is supposed to live without forgetting that, then says it is impossible, and that he cannot do it. He cries and declares that he will get rid of all of them, even if it kills him. Sylvester stands in front of him, watching in silence. Sylvester's eyes are shown as he listens. The moon hangs in the night sky as Sylvester calls Han Segyeon an annoying brat. Inside a cafe, people sit and talk as the scene shifts. Jungjun greets Sylvester and says that he is here. Sylvester responds that he told him not to call him by that name. A woman says that Han Segyeon is here too and remarks that he is the kid who survived back then. Sylvester asks what happened to what they talked about. Jungjun tells that it seems the person they are looking for left Korea. Sylvester sits down and asks whether they managed to do nothing but track him and lose him again, then trails off. Jungjun questions why that guy was brought there and says he looks too flimsy to be thrown in right now. Sylvester warns that the moment someone lets their guard down, a vampire could break their bones and sever their muscles. Segyeon then asks how they can fight against those guys. Sylvester explains that this is called psychedelic moon, and that in order to fight vampires, humans must consume it. If it is taken, the pain subsides, and the user becomes able to exert many times their normal strength. However, the more it is used, the more the body breaks down, and relying on this power leads to dying alone, since it is made of vampire blood. If things go even slightly wrong, the user could end up becoming the same as them. Sylvester asks if Segyeon still wants to take revenge after hearing that, and says they are being told this now. He warned that if Segyeon steps into the darkness of the night, he will never be able to return to reality. Segyeon repeats that not being able to return to reality applies to him already. He grips Sylvester's hand, and says he already cannot return. Sylvester demands to know what Segyeon is doing, and asks who told him to take it now. Segyeon pushes forward, and Sylvester reacts to the sudden movement. Song Deok Yun watches, and remarks that Segyeon is absurd, but has some fire in him. Song Deok-yeon introduces himself as a vampire hunter, and Sylvester tells him that he will leave Segeon to him, instructing Song Deok-yeon to bring Segeon to a point where he will not die easily. Song Deok-yeon responds that there is no other choice and accepts the task. Song Deok-yeon places a hand on Segeon's head and welcomes him to the world of the Mad Moon. Sylvester orders the women present there named as Song Hui to immediately search for a boat to Mexico. Segeon reacts in confusion and asks if Song Deok-yeon is going abroad, then asks who will train him. Outside, Sylvester dismisses it as ridiculous and questions whether Segeon can even be made useful. Song Deok-yeon answers that he will have to try hard, and Sylvester says he will repeat welcome again. He welcomes Han Se-gun to the world of the Mad Moon. 1 year later, at the Benia Club, several black cars are parked along the roadside. A car door opens, and a man named as Cheon Young-hoo, the Sangdong gang deputy boss, steps out. Someone calls out saying that Hyung-nim is here. A group of men line up on both sides as Cheon Young-hoo walks forward. Cheon Young-hoo dismisses being called Hyung-nim and tells them to call him Sunbae now, adding that they are businessmen who should do proper business. The other man agrees and says he is right. Young-hoo asks why he was called, and the man replies that his Sunbae has been very busy lately. The man hesitates and says it is about something. Inside the venue, several people lie on the floor while one person stands in the center. A man wearing a cap stands with his back turned. Young-hoo asks if he was called because of this, and the man nervously confirms. Young-hoo angrily tells him to manage the spots properly. The man apologizes and corrects himself, calling him Sunbae. Young-hoo questions if that is the one who destroyed their hideout. The cap-wearing man stands alone in the center of the venue while several people lie on the floor around him. Young-hoo observes him and notes that he was told this cap-wearing guy named Segeon was a foreigner, then remarks that Segeon looks very young. Young-hoo insults Segeon and asks if he has been messing around. Segeon reacts with confusion. Young-hoo says it is the first time in his life seeing a thug like Segeon, and adds that if Segeon wants something in a free, this is a democratic nation, so he should just say it. Young-hoo asks what Segeon plans to do now, and states that they need to open for business soon. Segeon questions being called a thug, and says he is acting because they are not giving him the item, even though he already paid the down payment. Young-hoo repeats the word thing and asks if Segeon did not know. Segeon explains that Young-hoo's lackeys took 5 million won in cash, and that as their officer, Young-hoo should know. Segeon adds that this sounds like a thuggish organization. Young-hoo becomes irritated and demands to know what Segeon is talking about. The man hesitates, and Segeon explains that it involves a Dragunov, a Tokarev, and an AK-47. Young-hoo reacts in disbelief, and asks if Segeon wants all of that for just 5 million, then questions how much Segeon thinks each item costs. Young-hoo asks if Segeon is saying this while knowing everything. Segeon asks what Young-hoo means by knowing what. Segeon states that the Sangdong gang brings in Russian and Chinese weapons and distributes them, and adds that this is why they charge several times the original price. Young-hoo falls silent. He then scoffs and says there is no reason to talk with someone like this, then tells his men to report Segeon to the police and move on. Segeon threatens if that will really be fine. He remarks that he could tell the authorities that the Sangdong gang, which claims to sell knives and guns, is now dealing drugs as well. Young-hoo suddenly shouts at his men, demanding to know what they are doing. He turns back with a furious expression and orders them to slice up Segeon immediately. Segeon calmly raises his hand. One of the men rushes in and swings his weapon, but Segeon steps in and strikes him head-on, stopping the attack and knocking him back. Segeon lowers his head slightly and steps into the incoming attack. One man swings his weapon downward, but Segeon slips inside the strike and drives his body forward. Segeon strikes again in one continuous motion, lifting the man off his feet and slamming him down. The second man rushes in, but Segeon closes the distance and hits him head-on, dropping him as well. Young-hoo reacts in shock, realizing that Segeon took down both men by himself. Segeon straightens up while the two men lie motionless on the floor. He turns and begins walking away at a calm pace. Young-hoo steps forward and asks what Segeon wants. Segeon stops in front of him and states that he wants a Dragunov, a Tokarev, and an AK-47, adding that he has already paid. Young-hoo reluctantly says that they cannot fulfill the deal right now, and explains that it is not as easy as always carrying the guns they sell. He demands that Segeon at least tell him where and when the deal will happen. Segeon agrees and sets the time for tomorrow at 8 p.m. He specifies the location as the Yoido Hyungshin Securities parking lot. Segeon turns his back and leaves. Young-hoo curses under his breath and calls him bloody bastard. The man asks if Young-hoo is alright and calls him Sunbae. Young-hoo snaps back that it is Hyung-nim, not Sunbae. The man quickly corrects himself and answers. Young-hoo says it cannot be helped and orders his men to tell those guys to come. The scene shifts outside a brick warehouse at sunset. Inside, blood packs are lined up on a machine, and a dealer who trades vampire blood in Korea named as Old Man Jew comments that lately they have been really bad. He dismisses them as all a bunch of crap. He explains that most of the blood brought in has VAT levels below 20. Song Deok-yeon states that most of the guys running things around here are from the Sangdong gang. He questions how the levels could be that low even if they are just mutts and asks whether the machine was tampered with. The The old man laughs it off and says that if it is not believable, they can go somewhere else, adding that the machine is not an ordinary one. Songdik says he did not actually mean that, and asks why the old man has to be so serious. The old man tells him to stop babbling and just take the money. The old man brings up Youngjun and says that his entire family got killed by vampires, then asks if there has been any contact with him since. Songdek responds that there is no reason to talk about him and turns away, but mocks that Youngjun is probably running around excitedly with a knife and says he should just get turned into a vampire. He says he is leaving, and calls Old Man Ju an old man. The old man mutters that the man is never honest. Outside the warehouse, Songdek walks away. He suddenly reacts with a brief sound and questions if he is only coming back now. Songdek tells Segun not to say that he went somewhere and got into another fight again, and Segun denies it, saying not at all. Songdek asks why Segun cannot look him in the eyes. Segun brings up catching vampires and says he cannot even begin to talk about that. With Songdek says Segun still lacks skill and should focus only on training without thinking about anything else. He adds that he understands Segun's body is itching now that he has gotten better, but going around causing trouble with shady people is not something that will happen. Segun tells there is no need to worry. Songdek agrees to leave it there. Segun pauses and asks what should be done if there is a need to kill a person. Songdek answers that the choice is to kill, explaining that if one starts from the assumption that a person must be killed, then the decision is obvious. Even though there can be arguments about situations where killing is truly necessary, Segun responds that he understands. Songdek says he was right when he thought Segun was thinking about something else, then grabs Segun and suggests going to the training gym and getting in the ring since it has been a while. Segun reacts in shock and shouts no. A city skyline is shown at night. Several men stand together in a dark interior, and one of them questions whether they are really being asked to step forward just to catch one kid. Another man tells him to calm down and says that is not how he should think, adding that although they became vampires, still one must be loyal to Hyungnims. Other man replies that loyalty does not exist and asks if he remembers 1 year ago, when their people were entertaining the junkie party and all got beaten up, and how the responsibility was placed on them just because they were the same vampires. He adds that even today they are still whining about catching one little punk. A sudden impact follows as something is thrown with force. The clash escalates as bodies are smashed and sent flying. A powerful burst erupts as someone is struck head-on. One reacts saying that all the guys outside were already dealt with, and adds that even though it has not been long since they became vampires, they were still valuable assets. Both vampires stand together, and one asks if he is done having fun with their little lump of blood. He asks what they should do since they cannot give what was asked for. Segun replies that there was no expectation of getting it anyway. Both vampires react in shock. Segun stands holding a sword and says that nothing else can be expected from bullies. He adds that if he plucks out their canines and sells them, that should be good business. In past while training, Songdeok mentions that the vampire who killed the family is most likely belonged to the Sangdong gang. Segun reacts by questioning the Sangdong gang. Segun asks whether this means vampires are working together with gangsters. The fight resumes as Segun charges forward and strikes Songdeok, forcing him back. Segun follows up by twisting his body and delivering another heavy blow. Songdeok is sent flying as Segun's attack lands cleanly. Segun closes in again and drives a powerful strike into Songdeok's body. Songdeok staggers as Segun continues pressing the attack. He remarks that Segun's strength is impressive. He then asks if Segun knows why Sylvester is called the hunter of true vampires. Segun questions, why bringing up that now? Songdeok mentions that Sylvester killed the true vampire known as Jokyo. Segun asks about what that means. He attacks while blocking the attack. Songdeok tells that the true vampires are those who are extremely powerful beings, with an VT that usually exceeds hundreds of thousands. They regenerate faster that sunlight can destroy them, so they can operate in day 2. Songdeok tells that among those true vampires, the Jokyo clan led by a vampire named Jokyo was a clan that was famous among even vampire forces. Segun attacks and Songdeok dodges that attack. He then counterattack with his kick, sending Segun flying backward. He states that after Jokyo was killed by Sylvester, the clan disintegrated instantly. Segun, lying on the ground, asks if this means the surviving members of the Jokyo clan joined forces with the Sangdong gang. Songdeok confirms that they are searching for traces of Jokyo. Segun asks what is meant by traces. Songdeok explains that they want to inherit Jokyo's power and reclaim their former glory. The two continue fighting inside the ring. As the explanation continues, Segun suddenly realizes something and reacts in shock. Songdeok slams Segun down with force, making him cough in pain. He states that even if the Jokyo clan is no longer what it used to be, the Esquire, the second in command, or say the successor is still alive, Songdeok warns Segun not to act recklessly, and says that if Segun becomes their target, every second will turn into living hell. Whereas in present, a vampire leaps forward with claws extended towards Segun as he sits on a motorcycle. The vampire who is boss of them standing beside a car asks if help is needed. The vampire refuses and says he will handle it alone. He tells the boss to just stay put. The boss reacts, asking if he is giving orders now. The vampire turns his head, baring his teeth, and repeats that the boss should stay put for a bit. The motorcycle's headlight flares as Segun accelerates straight toward the vampire. The vampire steps forward and swings an arm to intercept but got hit. Segun closes the distance and slashes as he passes, the blade cutting through the air. The motorcycle skids and spins across the ground while Segun launches himself off it. The vampire snarls and notes that it is the same pattern as before. Segun advances without hesitation, eyes fixed on the target. The vampire shouts in anger, asking if Segun thinks he is a fool. Segun completes the charge and strikes again, his sword arcing toward the vampire. The vampire shouts that he predicted everything. The vampire attacks. Segun tries to block but fails. Segun swings his sword upward in a powerful arc, but his sword breaks. He did not thought that sword will broke this easily. The vampire laughs and asks mockingly whether that was fun. Segun curses angrily and lunges forward. The vampire grunts as Segun struck his broken sword in the vampire. The vampire then drops to one knee after the exchange. The vampire struggles to breathe and reacts in confusion. The vampire begins to rise, trying to speak, trying to say boss. The boss appears and scolds him, asking if he was not told to stay put. Segun acknowledges the situation, says it is good. He then states that he poured a full 5 million won into the organization. His fist tightens as he prepares to act. Segun thinks that he needs to take at least this much back to balance the numbers. The vampire's eyes widen in shock. Segun challenges him, asking if he should not. Segun slashes downward, and blood sprays violently. The boss watches in silence. Segun stands with his back turned, carrying a sword, while the boss comments that the gloves Segun is wearing look strange and asks if they are from the 21st century. Segun remains silent. The boss says it seems Segun already expected them to show up and asks why Segun is going this far. Segun responds that you want me to explain my business. Segun raises his weapon and states that the reason is the boss's head, adding that if he understands, he should stop the nonsense and come at him. The boss replies that this reaction is new, and asks if Segun's blood type is AB, then says he has already finished analyzing Segun's style and claims Segun's knife is broken, and the gloves have already been figured out. She moves to attack, but Segun counters with America's weapon, and knocks him down. The boss, on the ground, mocks Segun and asks if that is all he has. When did he has this weapon? Segun advances, and again delivers a decisive strike. He states that he already told the reason, and repeats that it is, your head. Blue flames spread over the fallen body on the ground as Segun nearby, with blood visible around the scene. Segun turns his head sharply and lets out a brief cry of pain. He grips his injured arm and states that it cannot be helped. Segun leaps upward while clutching his arm, letting out a strange sound. After healing his hand, Segun moves with his motorcycle. Songdik greets Segun saying that he is finally out. Songdik asks whether Segun's stomach feels better after that little tantrum. Segun asks how Songdik tracked him. Songdik answers that there is something called GPS in this world. He comments that Segun is not like he used to be these days. Segun asks what Songdik means. Songdik explains that he is talking about the motorcycle, says Segun rides it much more recklessly than before, and adds that Segun used to treat it like some kind of sacred treasure. Segun remains silent. He gets on the motorcycle and says that it is none of Songdik's business. Segun rides off into the city. Songdik watches him leave and exhales slowly, whereas at night, the boss of the Sangdong gang, named as Jung Sangdong, questions whether that is all. He says they were all wiped out even though he sent 6 of them, and Yonggu apologizes to him. Sangdong praises the situation as impressive. He then says he does not know how the other found out. The group comments that the brat turned out to be a vampire hunter. Sangdong says this has become a headache, and that he turned a blind eye when those vampire hunter bastards were secretly picking off 1 or 2 of them. He adds that this incident has made the Sangdong gang look like a complete joke. Yonghu asks whether they should try contacting the Jokyo clan. Sangdong reacts angrily, accusing him of advertising that he is screwed. He says it was said to be a miner who rides a motorcycle, and Yonghu says it is not certain but that is what it looks like. Sangdong orders them to throw money at the kids if needed and find him no matter what, then orders them to find him and kill him without fail. When Yonghu interrupts, Sangdong asks if he didn't listen what he said. Bring that bastard's head this time for sure. The street is shown at night. Outside a convenience store, Segun and Songdik sit at a table. Segun says that Songdik was the one who told him the Sangdong gang is connected to the Jokyo clan. Songdik confirms that he said that. Segun asks why Songduk just leaves them alone, and asks if he is afraid of some gangsters. Songdik answers that he is not afraid. Segun says the reason must be because there is no money in it. Songdik adds that Segun knows him well. Segun says those people deserve to die, and that whether it makes money or not, the longer vampires are left alive the worse it gets. He asks if it is not just a spreading plague. He explains that cutting them down while they are still sprouts is much easier than cutting down a giant tree. He then asks if it is because Songdik has never lost anything precious before. Songdik challenges whether Segun thinks he is the one to judge who deserves to die. Songdik tells him not to make him laugh. He says he would not even kill a mosquito for the sake of an ideology, and that he only kills for money and profit. Segun stands in front of Songdik, and Songdik asks about him, then asks whether he injected himself with vampire blood. Songdik says he already told Segun that the blood of Jokyo line vampires is prone to causing mutations.
He sighs and says he should not have agreed to a deal with a true vampire hunter. He tells Segun to pack his bags and get out today. Songdik says he does not want to get tangled up with the Jokyo clan because of someone like Segun. Segun agrees and says he will do that. Songdik thought that when Segun thinks about the bastards who killed his family still living their lives as if nothing happened, anyone would go crazy. He says Old Man Ju should not have brought up June for no reason. Songdik calls out Han Segun and says he put in a few knives and some ammunition. He adds that it is only about 500 rounds, and that Segun will probably die before he even uses all of it. Songdik tells him to be careful, and says they are Hungarian-made and past their storage date, and that if Segun is unlucky, the gun might just explode. Segun stays silent, then thanks Songdik for everything and bows. Songdik tells him not to go turning into a vampire or anything. Songdik tells Segun that if that happens, he will hunt him down without mercy. Songdik says he does not give free passes just because he raised Segun. Segun lowers his head and listens. That night was a night where the moon was so beautiful. Segun rides a motorcycle down a street at night, and it was enough to bring one to tears. A group stands around a burning barrel. A man introduces himself as Cheon Young-hoo from Sangdong Credit Loans. Someone asks what else he wants. Young-hoo says there is no need for a long talk, and asks who their leader is, saying he needs to speak with him. Jin replies that it is him and says he has no business with someone like them. The group reacts, and Young-hoo clicks his tongue. He says he tried to play nice and complains about young brats being disrespectful these days. Several vampires reveal their red eyes and sharp teeth. The vampire pins Jin to the ground and holds him down as Jin groans in pain. A woman covers her face and cries out. Young-hoo tells the others not to bend Jin too far because he needs to hold the handlebars. He mocks that this brat is supposed to be a biker. Jin yells for them to stop and says he will do it. Young-hoo looks down at Jin. He orders a man to bring something over. The man asks what he means. Young-hoo says he means the bag of money in the trunk. After that he says this is the down payment. He tells them to use it to tempt them with new bikes or buy some meat and do whatever they want. He then orders them to make sure the green-haired high school brat is brought before him. He asks if that is all understood. Jin nods weakly. Young-hoo says this is a warning. One of the vampire grabs Jin by the head and forces him down, making Jin cry out in pain. Young-hoo stops him and says they cannot have Jin dying before they even start. The vampire releases his grip. They stand in an alley as the group remains behind them. Young-hoo says it is getting dark and that this idiot is getting even stupider. It would be nice if he could be controlled with crosses or garlic. At the Song Hui's shop, the door opens. She apologizes and says they are closed for the day. She recognizes Segun and says it has been a while, about 4 months. She says Segun has become a fine man and has really grown a lot. Segun says it is because he got growth hormone injections. She asks how it is and how Segun feels about being independent. Segun replies that she knew after all. She says Song Deo-kyeon raised Segun because he received a request. She says that since she is Sylvie's spokesperson in Korea, she receives reports. She adds that it does not seem like Segun came here for that. She asks what is going on. Segun says he heard there is a tool that can detect vampires. Song Hui explains that the tool is called a bloodstone pendulum. She adds that finding vampires with it will not be easy, and says it senses nearby vampires, but the maximum detection range is only about 20 meters. Segun says he will buy it right now. Song Hui reacts, and says she will not stop him if that is the case, but tells him it is better to use his funds wisely. She adds that there is also a crossbow equipped with silver chip quarrels, and asks how about that. Segun replies that he already has a few weapons. Song Hui says that he does not have a real weapon in the true sense, and asks if Old Man Ju refuses to sell Psychedelic Moon to him. Segun says it is probably because he is reluctant to deal with a minor. Seong Hui says there is no other vampire dealer as reliable as Old Man Ju, and adds that he must just be a man of principle. She suddenly realizes something and reacts. Segun looks at Song Hui in confusion. Song Hui moves and says she has a few items that are only about VT-13, and asks if she should give him those, saying this will be a secret between the two of them. She shows him a small vial. Segun thanks Seong Hui. Segun finishes. Song Hui informs him that cards are not accepted. Segun acknowledges this and leaves. Later, Segun is alone outside as time passes. He recalls when Sylvester asks whether Segun consumed vampire blood and tells him not to whine, adding that misfortune is not his alone. He then welcomes Segun to the world of the crazed moon. Segun wonders if a year has already passed and questions whether Sylvester will even return to Korea. Jin calls out to Segun, saying it has been a long time, and that he has changed so much he was hard to recognize, asking if it has been about a year. The group approach and comment that Segun looks well, and that it is no wonder he could not be found no matter how much they searched. They ask what happened to his hair, and remark that he has grown tall, asking if he remembers them. Segun responds by asking who they are. Jin reacts that the way Segun speaks is the same as ever. He then insults him by saying Segun's blood has not even dried yet, and adds that the more he thinks about it, the angrier he gets, saying he went through hell trying to find Segun and calling him a bastard. Jin angrily tells Segun that he went through hell trying to find him, and calls him a bastard. Segun asks if Jin wants to die. When his pendulum glows, he realizes that here is a vampire, even though the sun is still out, and that a vampire who can move properly without losing strength under this kind of sun can only be a true vampire, a master of vampires. He notices a bloodstain and wonder if Jin was bitten by a vampire, noting that being bitten does not always lead to mutation, but judging from the state of his neck, he must be in the process of becoming a vampire. Segun asks Jin if he is from the Sangdong gang. Jin says that since Segun recognizes them immediately, there is no need to ask more. Segun asks how much they are being paid. Jin answers that it is 2 million won just for the location, and 8 million won if they catch Segun and bring him in. He adds that they have no intention of taking home a small cut. Segun thinks that he would like to kill them right now, but there are too many eyes watching, and he then asks whether 8 million won is supposed to be a lot with this many people. He tells them that they have turned into total beggars. Jin reacts angrily and lunges forward, shouting in disbelief. Segun tells them that if they want to keep their pride as bikers, they should fight like bikers instead of acting like thugs. Both of them move to their motorcycles and spread out onto the road. A man explains that since it is a cannonball, Segun should already know the rules, and states that the finish line is the entrance to the Gyeonggan Expressway. Before race starts, let me tell you that a cannonball is a long-distance race with no rules. Jin remarks that it has been a while since they rode together like this. He says that Segun should have behaved a bit better, just a little more gentle. They might have had a relationship where they could share a can of beer. Segun then falls silent. Segun tells Jin to take a good look at the sunset, saying that it will be the last sight he ever sees. Jin dismisses this as nonsense. The man raises his fist with a can and brings it down in a sudden strike. Segun rides ahead as motorcycles surge forward at high speed, their engines roaring while the road curves sharply. Jin chases closely behind on his motorcycle, pushing forward aggressively as the bikes weave through traffic and take a hard turn. The motorcycles skid across the road, scattering debris as they race past cars below from an overhead view. Jin laughs loudly while riding and mocks Segun, saying he must not have ridden his bike in a while, and asking why he has gotten so slow. He adds that Segun is all washed up. He calls out to Segun, asking if he is listening. Segun thinks that feralization is progressing, but Jin is still human. He recalls when Songdiak mentions that if the premise requires killing a person, then there is no need to hesitate, repeating that if killing is required, hesitation is unnecessary. Segun suddenly veers away and accelerates in a different direction. Jin shouts at Segun, demanding to know where he is going. Jin continues riding at full speed, chasing after him along the curved road. Two other bikers notice the sudden change and question why both of them are acting like that all of a sudden. One of them points out that the highway entrance is in the other direction, whereas Young-hoo asks if Jin is chasing that guy right now. A man of Jin's group replies that rather than a chase, it is more like a race. Young-hoo reacts in disbelief, and asks what kind of nonsense that is. The man says that a man's battle should be called that. Young-hoo then curses, tells him to call the others back, and shouts in frustration, questioning what kind of battle this is. He thinks that Segun is more than the others think. Young-hoo says he is coming right now and orders them not to let Segun go anywhere and to keep him there. The answer comes that they lost him. Young-hoo reacts in shock. At a construction site under the red sky, the motorcycle arrives and stops. Jin calls out to Segun by name. He rides in and shouts at Segun, questioning whether he is running away in the middle of a race. Jin insults him, saying this is not what a man does and calling him a coward for fleeing. Segun responds that Jin just said he would not do it. Jin reacts in confusion. Segun strikes Jin in the neck while Jin is on his motorcycle. Jin coughs violently as the motorcycle loses balance and crashes. Segun stands over Jin, who lies on the ground beside his fallen motorcycle. Segun says that whether it was 1 year or 10 years does not matter. Jin should have ignored someone like him forever. Segun looks down at Jin, and says that it is painful. Jin lies on the ground, bleeding from his mouth. Segun says he will make it easier for Jin, and tells him to drink. Segun says that Jin might even survive. Jin's body reacts as something spreads inside him. Jin realizes that it does not hurt, and finds it strange. Jin feels power overflowing. Jin's body convulses as the change intensifies. Jin lets out a distorted scream as his body transforms. Segun watches calmly, as blue energy surges around Jin. Jin curses Segun and asks what he did to him. Whereas the group gather near parked cars and motorcycles, Young-hoo at the front stares ahead with a tense expression. He raises his arm and signals the others. Jin was no longer human. They saw the construction site under a red sky as smoke spreads. They reach there. Jin was a human whose feralization had already progressed. The blue flames continue to burn around the fallen motorcycle. Young-hoo looks shocked as he watches. Segun thinks that it was an unavoidable choice. It was necessary to kill. Although Segun did not know in what instance it would be necessary to kill a person, such a case did exist. A memory shows Jin riding a motorcycle, smiling, saying they could have been friends who shared a can of beer. Segun thinks that it existed, that kind of case in which there is always a necessity to kill. He motorcycle rides along the road at sunset, whether it really existed. A crowd stands at a crosswalk at night as people wait to cross the street. Someone politely asks to be excused. Inside a bar, a server stands holding a notepad and looks toward a seated customer. The server hesitates and asks what the customer would like to order. The seated man relaxes on the sofa and reassures the server that it is fine, adding that the server can speak Korean. The man smiles calmly and states that he understands everything. The server responds with relief and asks what she can get for him, and the man asks if they have champagne. Someone suddenly calls out for master. The man turns toward and asks what it is calling him Bill. A boy enters with shock expression. He tells, outside at night, a girl suddenly runs into view and collapses onto the pavement. The man reaches outside and see a girl near his car. He looks at Bill, and Bill reacts with confusion. After a while they move from a bridge. Inside the car, Bill looks at the girl. He asks his master if this is alright. The man remarks that leaving the Asian girl to the police would be questionable. He responds that everything in this world has a connection and addresses Bill by his full name Wilhelm. He adds that he values that greatly. He then asks if Wilhelm does not know that best, having met him. Wilhelm admits that is true, but trails off. He continues that sometimes he does not know what the master is thinking. The man laughs and says that connections are not always rational. He proudly declares that he is a romanticist, and we got to know that he is a true vampire named as Phantom. A wide view shows the city at night spread out below. Phantom stands as Wilhelm reports that he returned that girl to the medical Yonsei center. Phantom praises him, saying good job, and remarks that he should go visit her sometime. Wilhelm asks why his master cares so much about that Asian girl. Phantom asks if he didn't told that he is a romanticist. Wilhelm opposes that his master do realize there is no such things as romanticist. If you are running away from your work, he says. If his master truly wants to find romance, then he should first finish his all works. And once that's done, then he don't care if his master buy flowers or do whatever else. Phantom remarks that flowers are good idea. He then asks if Wilhelm looked into it. Wilhelm confirms yes. He states that it was on TV recently and the girl's name is Yoon Mi-hee, and that it is said she was sexually assaulted by her classmates. After a while, Wilhelm remarks that, as expected, she was not an ordinary lady. He says that 6 high school girls instigated the rape. He adds that on the 4th, 6 students, including Miss W from a girls' high school, were booked without detention. Wilhelm explains that they reportedly instigated men around them to sexually assault the victim multiple times simply because she was usually disobedient and arrogant. Phantom comments that for the victim, it is a calm article that would make their blood boil. Wilhelm informs Phantom that a video of Sylvester has just arrived and asks if he would like to watch it. Phantom adds that Sylvester still seems to be poking around everywhere, and says he heard Sylvester went overseas to find Phantom, concluding that he must really hate him. He bends forward, lowers his glass, and says he thought he would have some fun visiting Korea after such a long time. Wilhelm says that man not only got Phantom excommunicated from the Vatican still from all his master's account. Phantom agrees as yes. Wilhelm asks whether Phantom will not watch it. Phantom leans back with his head resting on his hand. He replies that he should not, but that he must watch it because Wilhelm was told to work. In the video, a vampire is shown sitting on the ground with blood spread across the pavement. Sylvester stands facing him in the dark. Phantom murmurs that it returns to ashes and dust to dust. The injured vampire begs to be spared. Sylvester looks down at him. Phantom asks if the vampire is begging for his life. Phantom states that the vampire filled his own veins with the blood of others. He asks whether the vampire is now claiming to be a living being. He says that if so, he should cry. Phantom holds out the glass of blood and tells him to cry and prove his purity. A blade presses against the vampire's neck as he screams in fear. Phantom remarks that see that, you can't cry and that is your limit. Sylvester raises his weapon and strikes downward. Blood splashes violently and spills through the air. Phantom swings his arm upward while holding the glass, scattering the blood. Sylvester looks at the camera that was recording and shows middle finger. Phantom says that he has not changed. He adds that his repertoire never varies, and calls him a failure as a poet, addressing him as Sylvester. Whereas we see Sagan on second day, he leans over a toilet and struggles, unable to eat anything. He thinks that it was an unavoidable choice. Sagan leans over a toilet and vomits violently. He recalls Songdek saying whether Sagan is going to judge and decide if someone deserves to die. Songdek says the idea is laughable, and tells him not to make him laugh. Sagan pauses and wonders what he was supposed to do. A cup of instant noodles remains untouched on a table. Sagan sits alone outside a convenience store under an umbrella. Sagan watches people passing by and wonders where they are all going so diligently. Sagan wonders what they are so busy with. A girl approaches and politely asks to be excused. Sagan reacts with confusion as she addresses him. The girl asks Sagan if Simone ever told him that he looks like Kurt Cobain. Sagan thinks that people do ask him if he is interested to join any group or something, but this is first time hearing something like this. A man interrupts the girl, and she says that's why she hate this. The man with his group questions if she is deaf or cannot hear what he is saying. The man asks who is this bastard. Sagan stands and walks away from there, while the group follows behind him, and one of them mutters in anger, again calling him a bastard. The man shouts at Sagan, asking where he thinks he is going. He yells that someone is talking to him right now. Sagan strikes him in the face. The man is thrown backward and crashes to the ground as blood splatters across the wall and pavement. The girl watches with wide eyes as Segun stands calmly. Segun apologizes and says he thought a bug had landed on the man. The injured man looks at the blood on his hand in shock. Segun apologizes again as the man asks to follow them before they kill him. Segun questions whether the act is to kill a person like him. Segun turns his head slightly, reacting to something behind him. The girl looks down at her phone while holding it close to her face. The phone shows music playing as the sound continues. The music keeps playing. A man's foot swings down towards Segun. Segun is surrounded as several men rush in to attack him. Segun twists his body and strikes back, throwing one man off balance. Another man charges straight at Segun. The music continues as Segun raises his fist. Segun's punch lands directly on the man's face. Segun follows through and forces the attackers backward. From below, the girl sits on the stairs while a man falls there. One man freezes with his hands raised as another is struck down, and the music continues to play. Segun kicks forward as a man staggers back, crying out in pain. The man is knocked off his feet and slides across the ground while shouting in pain. The fallen man continues screaming as he tumbles and crashes onto the pavement. Segun turns his head as he senses movement behind him. A man attacks hard on Segun, stopping it mid-motion. An attacker lunges in from the side and the music continues to play. The man insists that he is not the one as he stares at Segun in fear. Segun advances steadily while the man backs away with his arms spread. The man swings a knife downward towards Segun. Segun blocks and counters as the blade comes down, stopping the attack. The man's eye widens in fear. Segun drives his strike forward, sending the man reeling as blood sprays. Segun looks down coldly and tells him to try more, reminding him that he said he would kill someone. The man's foot slams into the ground as Segun demands more and urges him to try it. Segun grabs the man and strikes him again while shouting for him to do it. He continues provoking him, demanding that he try and kill him. Segun stands over the fallen man and questions whether this is really enough to kill someone. The music continues as the girl on the stairs watches with a tense expression. Segun turns his head, his expression tightening. The girl looks back at him, startled. Segun lowers his body and suddenly dashes forward down the alley. Blood splatters across the ground as his body crashes down. All men lie motionless across the alley, blood trailing between them, while the girl stands frozen near the stairs. The scene shifts to the exterior of a quiet cafe. Inside, Seung-hui cleans the floor alone and wonders if she should hire a part-timer. She pauses and looks toward the window as a car arrives outside. A black car pulls over, its door lifting open. She smiles and calls his name, Sylvester. Sylvester remarks that he already told not to call this name. She asks why he has returned, and why he is back much earlier than scheduled. He answers that it is because he likes Dostoevsky. Later, Segun kneels on a bed in a dim room, his body tense and breathing heavy. Segun looks down in confusion and wonders when he lost consciousness. A girl lies curled on the floor beside the bed and Segun wonders where he is. He looks around the room and thinks that the place is a complete mess. Segun sits up on the bed, holding a blood-stained cloth, and questions whether these are tissues, thinking it counts as first aid. The girl nearby asks if he is awake. Segun hesitates before responding. She tries to explain but stops herself, then states that he was stabbed, and asks if he will be okay if he stays like that. Segun turns toward her as she calls out to him. The girl moves closer and asks if he wants to do it with her. Segun reacts in shock and asks what she means. She asks if he does not want to touch her as she leans in close to his face. The girl pulls back slightly, smiles nervously and says she is okay with it. Segun stares at her in silence. He suddenly raises his voice, asking if she is crazy or high on something. The girl looks startled, then lowers her head and apologizes. Segun calms down and explains that he has not eaten in days and was on edge, then adds an apology for beating up her boyfriends. The girl calls out to him softly as he turns away. Segun pauses in response. The girl kneels in front of him and asks him to take her with him. Scene shifts and we see a cup instant noodles on a table. Segun and the girl sit side by side at a convenience store counter. The girl eats eagerly, focused on the food in front of her. Segun watches her and notes that she is really packing it away, thinking about his money. The girl quickly explains that they were not her boyfriends. Segun reacts with mild surprise. The girl adds that she only followed them because she was afraid she would get lost. Segun looks at her and asks if she thinks he is a kid. Segun lowers his gaze, thinking about whether she is in the same situation as him. Segun holds the cup of noodles in front of him. The girl smiles brightly and introduces herself as Jin Yumi. Segun eats quietly and responds that he did not ask. Later, outside a large building, a man shouts in frustration. A group of doctors stand together as a man complains about what kind of hospital lets a kid just run away. Mihi stands in the hospital doorway in her pajamas. Staff restrain the agitated man and warn that his behavior may negatively affect his daughter. The man shouts that his daughter nearly died on the streets, and questions how he is expected to remain calm. He demands to know who would take responsibility if she had died. He challenges them, and asks if they could. Amidst that, Phantom steps forward holding a bouquet of red roses, and observes that he has arrived at a bad time. The man turns on Phantom and demands to know who he is. Phantom raises a finger and asks for a moment. The man suddenly freezes, his expression twisting as if struck by an unseen force. Colors ripple and distort as the space warps. and the surrounding staff stand rigid with shadowed faces. Mihi watches silently from the doorway. Phantom thinks about medical records and related data, noting that the girl had been hospitalized for an entire year. The thought continues that humans are less resilient than they believe. He concludes that if her spirit had already died, she would not have left the hospital. Phantom walks through the corridor and apologizes for the previous day. He admits he did not realize how much effort she put into escaping, and acknowledges that he brought her back to a place like this. Phantom asks her to come with him. Mihi looks at the bouquet of red roses, as Phantom smiles faintly and states that she does not really have a choice because she is now kidnapped after all. Mihi lowers her gaze without responding. The view shifts to a wide bridge over the river, as traffic moves steadily across the city. Inside a red car, Phantom responds affirmatively to Mr. Lou Gibson, identified as Phantom's business alias. Phantom gives an order to prepare a full set of women's clothes in every size. The response questions whether the clothes are for Master Wilhelm. Mihi holds the bouquet tightly as Phantom comments that his sense of humor has improved. Phantom adds that if he ever fires the speaker, then he could probably become a stand-up comedian. The other side remains silent. Phantom notes that if Wilhelm does not resist, it might not be a bad look. Suddenly, Phantom jerks forward as something strikes him from the side. Glass shatters around him as the impact twists his body in the car. The bouquet is crushed between them during the collision. Phantom smiles faintly despite the impact and curses under his breath while saying, "You bastard." The red car skids across the road amid broken glass. On a nearby rooftop, Sylvester in a coat stands calmly with a rifle, overlooking the city. He asks if that was a decent greetings or not. After that, scene shifts to a tall building. Phantom with Mihi enter together. A staff member greets Phantom as Master Liu Kim and asks whether he has arrived. He reports that everything requested has been prepared, then pauses. Phantom responds that the work is good. He then instructs that the bodyguard ladies be changed, noting that they cannot keep wearing patient gowns forever. The bodyguards acknowledge the order. The group moves inside, with Mihi holding a bouquet as the others follow behind. A handful of bullets is placed into a person's hands, with the remark that this is included as well. The recipient reacts in surprise. He explains that 6 shots were fired in the blink of an eye, all directed at her, and that it was a relief they were just standard bullets. He says that if they had been silver bullets, the outcome would have been different. She would have turned into a vampire from even the leaked blood particles. Phantom comments that Sylvester has certainly become quite the gentleman, whereas Segun sits beside his motorcycle and thinks that this is the limit. He notes that it is a miracle the engine even started, admits he has been riding it through all that chaos, and concludes that it was greedy of him to expect it to stay intact. Segun thinks about wanting to send the motorcycle for repairs right away, or sell it and buy a new one, then admits that he has no money. He looks down at his empty wallet while sitting beside the motorcycle. He wonders why the old geezer refuses to trade, and notes that he is not going to stop fighting vampires just because the man says no. He recalls being told that minors are not accepted, and decides that he needs to sell this vampire blood soon. He concludes that he will have to find another dealer willing to trade with a minor and questions how to do that. Yumi suddenly appears in front of him and happily calls him Kurt Cobain. She leans in close, and Segun reacts in confusion as she says her legs go numb. Yumi cheerfully asks where they are going now, while Segun notes that she is talking as if they have already been somewhere together. He responds that it is late, and that they should go to sleep. She asks where he lives. Segun tells her not to ask things like that, and instead asks about her friends. Yumi explains that they all went to meet their boyfriends, and that some of them went home too. Segun tells her that she should go home as well, then asks if her parents will not worry about her being out this late and wonders if she ran away from home. Yumi answers that she does not have any parents. She looks down and states that she is an orphan. Segun then tells her to get on the back and says he will take her home. They ride through the road together on the motorcycle, cars passing by as Yumi leans against him and closes her eyes. She thinks herself as a delinquent girl, an authoritative and tyrannical father. Yumi's father tells her to just die. Yumi's mother, crying and bruised, states that rather than living such a tedious and miserable life, she would rather just die. Resentment at being treated like a possession, and she kneels alone before her parents' funeral who died in an accident. She thinks that this is the fulfillment of a twisted wish. After that, she simply surrendered her body to the madness, repeating days in self-destruction. As Segun rides the motorcycle with Yumi behind him, he thinks that he cannot offer comfort or support, that he cannot live his life for her, and that he cannot take responsibility for her either. Segun thinks that even though Yumi talks without any rhythm or reason, after hearing her story 3 or 4 times it starts to make sense on its own, and he wonders if it is because she is similar to him that he understands her so well. He recalls Yumi suddenly asks Segun if he wants to do it with her. Segun reacts, thinking of her as a crazy girl. The motorcycle speeds through the road, the sound of the engine filling the night. They arrive at a quiet street, and Segun stops the bike, telling Yumi that they are here and that she should go inside. Yumi asks where he is going now, and Segun answers that he has to go home too. As Segun starts to leave, Yumi hurriedly asks where he is going, and then asks when she can see him again. Segun responds that meeting at a convenience store would be fine and suggests that they eat breakfast together again. While driving, Segun curses the motorcycle, calling it cursed, and thinks that if he keeps riding it just because it is memento, he will end up as ashes himself. He realizes that he has to find a way to make money somehow. Later, Segun rides the motorcycle alone through the street and arrives at a building, then enters inside. Inside a cafe, he calls out Sylvester's name. Sylvester turns around. Segun asks when Sylvester came to Korea, and Sylvester replies that it was not long ago. Sylvester asks whether Segun even takes requests and similar work. Segun looks at the documents and questions what they are. Sylvester reacts with irritation. As he reads, Sylvester states that Segun has become quite arrogant in the short time since they last met, then adds that perhaps Segun has simply decided that he wants to die. Sylvester asks Segun whether he knows someone here. Segun remains silent. Sylvester looks at it and says that it seems so. He guesses that their partner for this venture will be a helpless greenhorn. Rain falls over city buildings, as someone said that for a brat from Phantasmagoria to come here, something strange must be happening. Well, Phantasmagoria is a vampire clan where Phantom serves as the lord. A group of men stand together indoors, followed by a close view of a red-eyed man named as Kyung from Jokyo clan touching his chin. Wilhelm says he looks decent enough for a human. Kyung remarks that a puppy putting on airs in its master's arms does not know its place, adding that the master is the same. Wilhelm warned that people who cozy up to mere gangsters should know better than to speak carelessly of him. As for them all, they will not even have arms left to be held anymore. Angry shouts follow, accusing him of causing this while the master was fighting Chang Jin, and blaming a cowardly true vampire hunter for interfering, until Kyung cuts them off and says that is enough. He says that the conversation has strayed off course, and they are told to state their main point and get lost. A suitcase is pushed forward across the floor. Kyung asks whether he is telling them to take this and leave, even though it was a surprise attack, then state that the true vampire hunter is the one who killed their master. He says that to fight someone like that, this amount is nowhere near enough. Wilhelm clarifies not to misunderstand and explains that the money is not to help with their revenge, adding that none of their esquires are even in Korea right now. Kyung then asks why the other party came in the first place. Wilhelm says that the target wanted is someone much weaker than that. Kyung reaches forward and takes a photo from the table, then looks down at it. Wilhelm tells the person in the photo is Sylvester's disciple, and that this amount should be more than enough, even for people like them. They ask for the location, and the answer is given as Gwangju, Seoul, followed by a remark asking if there is anything beyond that. Kyung says that they will have to earn their keep, then comments that this is a truly terrible client. Young-hoo reacts angrily and curses under his breath. Kyung then asks if this is someone he know. After a brief pause, Young-hoo confirmed that he is the high schooler who came to the club last time. Kyung reacts in shock, and Wilhelm concludes that the work will be finished quickly. Kyung answers in agreement and states that he can earn his keep in no time. Later, Phantom and Mihi stand by a large window overlooking the city at night. As Mihi asks whether Phantom is rich, the reply confirms that this is undeniably true. She then asks why he has interest in her. He explains that the reason is difficult to put into words and suggests calling it the sentiment of a kinsman. He is then asked whether he will really grant everything that is wished for, and the answer follows that if it is possible, then anything. The wish is stated as wanting to go to the place where those people are. He says haunt, then says that even if someone survives after enjoying their full allotted lifespan and continues to live endlessly, there will be a sound they begins to hear. It is a voice the living can never hear, vivid and clear, inciting destruction and death. He says it's like a chronic illness that comes from living in a body like this. Phantom stated that he valued endurance more than pleasure. He questioned what he meant by endurance. Phantom explained that endurance was the strength to live through the world while bearing pain, and that if something had to be protected through endurance, even the flames of hell could feel sweet to a little lady. He asked if he truly believed that. Phantom answered that he did. Phantom said that he did not intend to force his values on her, but if she kept living, good things would surely happen. He questioned whether they truly had. Then she called him a liar. Phantom said there were days when he could more or less believe that lie, and that was the truth. He stated that it did not matter anyway. Phantom thinks that this was the worst and that he had no lingering attachments to life. He thinks it would not be so bad to get revenge, and addressed the child who would become the youngest of his bloodline. Mihi turned her gaze to the side and began to move. Phantom held Mihi close in front of the window. Wilhelm approached and told Phantom that he had said the Jokyo clan. He widened his eyes in shock, and called out to Phantom. Phantom was seated while Mihi lay against him drinking his blood. Wilhelm clenched his teeth as dark energy gathered around him. Phantom reached out his blood-stained hand and told him to come along too before he changed his mind. He remarks that witnessed the beginning of new era. Meanwhile, Sylvester describes Phantom as a filthy, disgusting creature. No matter how long he may have lived, his body has rotted to the core from drowning in wealth and power. And yet, Sylvester questions whether he truly believes he can save humanity or something. Sylvester states that he is not even a god. Segun turns slightly and asks what he will do then. Sylvester says, "Bang." Segun lowers his gaze in silence, then begins walking away. Sylvester calls his name, Segun. Segun pauses and catches a small object between his fingers that Sylvester throws. Sylvester explains that the target of pure hatred comes from the woman taken in by the Vampire King. Segun stands in the light while Sylvester tells him to choose wisely. Sylvester warns him not to be an idiot. Later, Segun rides forward through the rain on his motorcycle as the engine roars and the bike speeds ahead. Segun's vampire-detecting artifact suddenly appears in the center of his chest and glow. He leans forward over the motorcycle and continues riding through the storm. A large vampire in the form of a bat flies above him in the dark sky. Segun looks up and recognizes it as bats. A massive shadow drops down toward him from above. Segun shouts as the dark shape crashes down. The monstrous vampire with glowing red eyes lunges forward in a wolf-like form, bearing sharp fangs and snarling. Segun bends lower over the motorcycle and accelerates as the engine roars again and the bike surges forward. His motorcycle bursts across the wet road at high speed. Watching from behind, a female vampire refers to him as this kid and asks whether he is the brat lord mentioned. The male vampire answers that it looks like it. From above, the road stretches through the rain while Segun speeds away on the motorcycle. The female vampire notices the weapon and reacts with surprise, wondering who that is and how he managed to get a real gun. She adds that gun possession is illegal in Korea. Segun suddenly pulls the motorcycle upward. The front wheel rises high as the motorcycle tilts vertically in front of the female vampire. She stands facing him, while the motorcycle lifts toward her. Segun calmly raises the handgun and points it toward the female vampire. Gunfire erupts as the shots strike near him. She shouts that Segun scared her. She twists the motorcycle and throws it away. The male vampire watches as the motorcycle flies upward into the rain. Segun lands on the ground. The female vampire mutters that this is bad. She comments that the brat is pretty skilled. The male vampire immediately responds that she just sucks. She reacts with surprise. In the rain, Segun remains crouched on the road as the confrontation continues. He stands in the rain holding 2 guns and notes that there are 3 rounds in the Tokarev and 5 in the Type 54. Even if he empties all of them into the vampires, he does not think he can win. The female vampire leans forward and remarks that, well, anyway. Dark whip-like appendages extend from her body and lash outward. Behind her, the male vampire approaches across the rain-soaked road. The female vampire lifts one of the dark appendages toward her mouth and wonders if she should refill what she has spilled. Segun suddenly moves forward across the wet road. He shouts for them to move, calling them sons of bitches. He raises both guns and fires upward as the muzzle flashes burst through the rain. The vampires move through the air while the bullets streak toward them. The male vampire states that even if the bullets are silver processed, something like a Tokarev could never do the job. He declares that there is not a chance in hell. His dark appendages surge downward through the rain as the attack rushes toward Segun. Segun dashes forward across the rain-soaked road, while dark appendages chase closely behind him. The 2 vampires watch him move. They suddenly rushes forward and closes the distance in an instant. The male vampire appears directly behind Segun and asks where he thinks he is going. Segun's foot slides across the wet ground as he tries to keep moving. The vampire strikes him from behind with a heavy blow. Segun's body jerks forward from the impact. His gun slips from his hand and falls through the rain. The weapon spins as it drops toward the flooded road. Segun twists his body and swings his arm while turning toward the vampire behind him. The female vampire stares at him with glowing red eyes. Segun suddenly raises the other gun in his hand. Female vampire's dark appendages wrap around his arm. He lets out a strange sound as the force pulls him. The appendages whip him upward and throw him into the air. His body flies across the rain-filled sky. Below, the vampire stands with the dark appendages stretched outward. Segun continues spinning through the air as the rain pours down. Both vampires remain on the road watching him. Segun crashes down hard onto the rain-soaked ground. Segun lands while the dark appendages remain wrapped around him, his gun still in his hand. The vampire asks how long he plans to keep acting tough. The appendages tighten and pull. Segun's body is lifted and dragged upward through the rain. The female vampire raises both arms. She declares that she already said it would not work. Her dark appendages slam Segun down violently into the ground. His body strikes the wet road and lies motionless on his back. The 2 vampires stand nearby watching him. The female vampire clicks her tongue in irritation. A memory appears of Yumi in Segun's mind. She leans forward playfully, then sits on a bench with her legs crossed. She smiles warmly. Back in the rain, Segun lies on the cracked road as steam-like breath escapes his mouth. The 2 vampires stand in the distance while he remains on the ground. The male vampire catches Segun with his dark appendages and drags Segun across the rain-soaked road. His body is pulled along the ground while the 2 vampires watch. The female vampire looks forward and calmly states that it is time to eat. Suddenly a shot strikes her head, and blood bursts outward. The male vampire reacts immediately and demands to know who the hell that is. In the rain, Songdiak appears holding a long gun fitted with a suppressor. He remarks that this little situation is ridiculous, trying to fight a vampire without even using psychedelic moon. He angrily calls Segun a crazy bastard and questions whether that is how he taught him. The vampire spreads the dark appendages outward and points ahead, shouting for the other to look over there. Song Deok's blue eyes sharpen as he grips the weapon. In the next instant he launches forward, cutting through the air with a powerful strike. Song Deok rushes forward through the rain and collides with the vampire. In an instant Song Deok fire a round on the vampire. He crashes down and struggles, letting out a rough sound. Song Deok lands and steadies himself while holding the rifle. The male vampire runs from there after knowing that female vampire is dead. Nearby, Segun pushes himself up from the ground. Song Deok states that he is going after that guy too. He tells Segun that he should hurry up and suck the vampire's blood first, then guard the goal. In the distance, the wounded vampire moves through the trees. Segun sucks the female vampire's blood in and injects himself. He realizes that the vampire's bloodline must be a true one, because the feeling of her blood is completely different from those mediocre vampires. He concludes that this must be why the vampire was so strong. Segun stands in the rain with blood staining the back of his shirt, his fist tightening as he faces forward. Rainwater splashes as he grips the sword hilt and lifts it from the ground. Scene shifts and we see several bodies lies motionless on the wet pavement. Segun stands in front of them, facing the scene. In another place, several bodies lie scattered across the ground. Segun walks forward through the rain. He states that he has weapons too. His hand tightens around the sword. He places the pill on his tongue, then declares that he is trained. Bright swirling colors burst outward around him as the energy spreads. Segun stands in the center of the glowing light, with both arms slightly spread. As the power rises around him, the colors fade into a glowing haze. Segun lowers into a stance, gripping the sword while stating that he is not the same as back then. He walks forward with a sword hanging in his hand. His eye focuses sharply ahead. He continues with the thought that even so, he had hoped she would not die. Seeing the scene in front of him, he starts crying. Yumi lies motionless on the bed while Mihi stands there. Segun declares that in the beginning, the Lord created Adam from dust, and created Eve from Adam's bone. Death is a holy ritual of returning to Eden. Segun points the gun on Mihi's head. He declares ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Meanwhile, rain falls as Sylvester stands holding his sword while the male vampire stands injured. Sylvester attacks and his strikes tear across the male vampire as blood bursts outward. Song Deok reacts that if the body is shredded like that again, he will not be able to draw a blood sample and asks for something to be left intact. Below them, blue flames burn across the ground. Sylvester states that there is no time to explain and tells him to go get the kid quickly. Song Deok wonders if Sylvester is not coming with him. Sylvester explains that too many eyes are watching now, and Song Deok asks whether something else is out there beside phantoms. Song Deok's expression tightens with worry. He asks if it could be Tetra Annex. Flames suddenly burst upward and spread across the building. Later, Song Deok stands beside the vehicle while the firelight reflects across the street. Headlights shine across the wet road. Song Deok asks Segun if he is okay. Segun stands at the doorway holding a red bag while blood stains the floor beneath his feet. He looks forward and quietly asks if Song Deok can give him a ride. Red emergency lights flash in the rain as fire trucks rush toward the burning building. Firefighters jump down and run toward the flames. From above, the fire spreads across the structure while smoke rises into the rainy sky. Sylvester stands on a balcony overlooking the city and the burning area below. Rain falls around him as he remains still. Lightning flashes in the sky, while several cats gather around his feet. Sylvester quietly tells them to spit it out. One cat lowers its head and drops several bullet casings onto the wet ground. Sylvester stands among the animals while rain continues to fall. Some time ago, scene shifts at a building named as Arjuna. Sylvester arrives there. Inside, Sylvester sits facing Phantom. Sylvester remarks that Phantom must have lost his mind by barging into Arjuna like this. Phantom explains that he has a matter to discuss that requires this level of discretion. Sylvester observes that Phantom has spent all this time avoiding him, and asks what changed his mind to come here in person. Phantom admits that before that, he knows it is a bit late to bring it up, but he cannot play the part of the weeping vampire. He tells Sylvester to go pester some other true vampire instead. Sylvester tells him to stop the nonsense, and asks why he is here. Phantom suggests that Sylvester should not be so cold, and proposes that they simply chat for a while. After all, it is not as if they are short on time, since they have near infinity at their disposal. Sylvester remarks that hearing someone who steals human time just to survive preaching about infinity is something he has neither the patience nor the interest for. He leans forward and demands that Phantom explain his real purpose for coming here. Phantom looks toward him and addresses him as Sylvester. He advises him not to try so hard to get on Tetra Annex's bad side. Sylvester remarks that a vampire worrying about a vampire hunter is touching. Phantom answers that it is not worry but a warning. Sylvester questions what would happen if he refuses to play nice. He then places his gun on the table and asks if Phantom is looking for a fight. Sylvester looks down at the weapon and responds that he would not mind settling it right there. Phantom then explains that their position is quite different from the days when savagery was the only law, and that for him to engage Sylvester like a common brute now would be a violation of his aesthetics. He sets his cup down and continues that regardless of what Sylvester may think, Phantom declares that he is the king of vampires and the king of humans. He adds that today marks a special occasion, a day to bestow the gift of vengeance upon the newest child of their bloodline. He pauses and looks towards Sylvester. Phantom remarks that he hopes Sylvester will not make him too angry, calling him his dear stalker. He then states that now that he has addressed the business Sylvester was so keen on, he will take his leave. Sylvester watches him silently. Phantom comments that the coffee was good. Later, in the rain outside, Sylvester stands holding the small casing while thinking that trying to send Deokyeon with him out of concern was pathetic. He then notices Segun and Songdeok approaching. He asks what were they thinking, not even retrieving the shell casings. Segun sits on a bench. Sylvester approaches and remarks that in the end it seems Segun could not get what he wanted. Segun addresses Sylvester by name. Sylvester lifts his head slightly. Segun asks if he looks like Kurt Cobain. Sylvester responds that Segun's head must be scrambled because he is talking nonsense. Segun leans back on the bench under the rain and laughs loudly. He then leans forward and covers his face with both hands, while the rain pours over him. From above, the empty rooftop area stretches under the heavy rain while a distant fire burns across the city. The scene shifts to a tall city building. In an alley, 3 men stand outside a building. One complains that the boss is such a jerk, saying there are not even that many customers but he piles on a ton of work. Another agrees and remarks that when the boss is alone he never does any of it himself. The first man adds that it is not like they can report him to the labor office. Another responds that the boss still seems like a decent guy to him, and even pays someone like him a salary. One of the men suddenly pauses and tells the others to hold up. He then asks what that sound is. In the dark alley ahead, a strange noise echoes as something moves. A large horned creature slowly emerges from the darkness while the men stare toward it. They wonder, what is that? A beggar, but this big. Is he eating something? But what is he eating? One of the men wonders what they should do now and asks if the 3 of them together could take it. The creature stands in the alley with its large body crouched low. Its eyes glow red as it stares ahead. The 3 men stare at it while one of them holds up his phone to see more clearly and starts recording. He murmurs that it looks like a monster. Suddenly, the creature lunges forward. Its attack slams into one of the men with a violent impact. Blood bursts outward as the strike tears through him. The remaining 2 men recoil in shock as blood splashes across them. The creature stands upright in front of them, towering over their bodies. One of the men remarks that it looks even bigger now. The creature's skull-like head turns while its red eyes glow in the dark. The creature thinks that he is sure he was human once. He reflects that he does not know when it started. One day, for no reason, a brutal and savage thirst and hunger came over him. From that day on, even who he was started to blur. The hunger clawed up his throat like hands tearing it open. Before he could resist, his consciousness snapped. By the time he came to again, he had already devoured countless corpses. Even then, it did not stop. He wonders if people were always this delicious. Scene shifts and we see night hangs over a quiet park beneath the crescent moon. A man wearing glasses walks along the path. Suddenly a loud crash echoes. The man jumps in shock. The same creature with glowing red eyes leaps down from above. He lands on the ground and rushes forward. The man falls backward as the creature charges toward him. The creature tears the man into half as blood sprays across the ground. A man inside a building raises his phone and takes a picture. The creature's red eyes glow as it stares ahead. He keeps attacking as bodies are thrown and blood splashes around it. He screams that he is hungry. Morning comes over a warehouse-like building. Songdeok asks why the old man looks scared of getting caught now, and why all the lights are off. He says he thought the old man would be closed by now. The old man answers that it is hard to do business when no one is bringing in product. He adds that neither Songdeok nor that punk Jongjun has shown their faces in ages. Songdeok stays silent. The old man grunts, unlocks the door and switch on the light. Bright light spills into the building as the 2 step inside. Machines power on. A television turns on, and the news begins reporting that late at night in a park in Gongseogu, Seoul, an unidentified being appeared. The old man tells Songdeok to hand him the bag. The news reports that several people were reportedly slaughtered at random. According to one witness, a monster burst out from a manhole cover and attacked people. Police state that they believe it to be a motiveless killing by a drunk or a socially frustrated assailant. Citizens who are at the scene strongly disagree. One person insists that the thing was not human. Another answers that it could not possibly be human. The report continues, questioning what kind of alcohol someone would even have to drink for a human body to be split clean in half like that. Songdeok mutters that it might be a corrupted. He reflects that if there is one unspoken rule between vampire hunters and vampires, it is that they stay in the shadows. What they do must never come to the surface. He adds that that rule has now been completely blown to pieces. The old man explains that vampires will start crawling out and try to handle the situation themselves. Hunters looking to cash in on it will flock there too. Songdeok looks to the side and remarks that things are going to turn into a mess again any day now. Elsewhere, police tape stretches across the scene marked "Do Not Cross." Police line. Night hangs over the park beneath the crescent moon. Near a row of vending machines, the creature crouches low on the ground, its body hunched and still. Suddenly, a fast strike slams into it, sending its body crashing across the ground as blood bursts outward. The creature scrapes along the pavement and stops. 2 male vampires walk along the path nearby, and Kyung comments that it is quite a racket. The creature crouches again in front of them. He remarks that people trying to sleep nearby are going to wake up. The creature's skull-like face lifts, its red eye glowing as it growls. The vampire named as Yuhu tells Kyung to move and casually calls out toward the creature. He lands in a low stance, his clawed hands extended. Yuhu turns his head slightly, a red glow shining from his eye as he smirks. He urges the creature to come on. The creature lunges forward toward him. He rushes straight at it. In the next instant, his claws tear through the creature's arm, slicing it open as blood sprays through the air. The creature snarls, its skull-like face twisting as its red eyes glow. Yuhu slams down with another strike. The creature reels back. It suddenly grabs him and smashes him down into the ground. He crashes hard and gasps in pain. The creature lifts its arm high and attacks. Suddenly Kyung interferes and attacks the creature. The creature is hit by a massive blast-type attack. Yuhu insists that he did not need his help, and that something like this could have been handled alone easily. Kyung warns that this is not a game and tells him not to let his guard down. He remarks that in comics this is exactly the moment when they always let the enemy get away. Yuhu quickly tells him not to jinx it. Suddenly a bullet pierces Yuhu's head. Kyung turns his head and calls out. The creature appears, holding a gun. A burst of gunfire erupts. Explosions and bright flashes tear through the area as bullets rip across the ground and bodies. Kyung hides behind a tree. He shouts in anger and calls the attacker a crazy bastard. He steadies himself and breathes heavily. Suddenly he screams in fury. His body shifts as horns rise from his head, and his form changes. His eyes glow intensely. He glares forward and declares that the little bastard will definitely be killed by him. Well, Yuhu lie motionless on the ground while blood spreads beneath him. The creature's shadow looms over his body. The creature stands nearby with its glowing red eyes and twisted form. The next morning, inside the cafe, Songhui at the counter notices someone and asks if Segun is there. Outside, a motorcycle is parked in front of the building. She remarks that she does not think she has seen that bike before, and wonders if it is a new ride. Segun answers that it is. He explains that he was lucky enough to find a dealer willing to trade with a minor. Songhui observes that he looks well dressed. She adds that he is starting to look like a real hunter. Segun asks where Sylvester is. She replies that Sylvester is sleeping upstairs and is probably waking up around now. Inside a dim room, Sylvester sits on the floor holding a gun. Segun steps into the doorway. Sylvester raises the gun and points it forward. Segun looks at him calmly. He remarks that it is good to see him again. The gun remains aimed directly at Segun. Sylvester tells Segun to break the habit of barging into people's rooms while they are sleeping, warning that one day he might get shot for it. Segun walks further into the room and remarks that hearing that while Sylvester is dressed like that ruins all credibility. Sylvester then asks what the matter is. Segun explains that it is about the case that has been all over the news lately. Sylvester clarifies that he means the monster that openly killed people in the park. Segun repeats the question and asks what Sylvester thinks about it. After a brief pause, Sylvester remarks that, as he thought, the country still does not have its vampire clans properly sitting behind the wheel of society, which is why things like that are running loose. Segun looks at him and questions what he means by leaving it alone, pointing out that people are dying out there. Sylvester answers that it is a corrupted, and that if left alone it will die on its own. He then tells Segun not to come to him for answers because he is not his private tutor. Sylvester adds that besides that, whatever the situation is, he wants to know what it actually means to Segun. Segun responds that Sylvester says that, but there must be something more to it. Sylvester lets out a quiet sigh and explains that the blood of a corrupted is worthless. He continues that a corrupted only ends up dragging out executioners. He explains that a corrupted is the result of a botched mutation and becomes so consumed by thirst and hunger that it no longer bothers hiding what it is. This means those people will crawl out to protect their clan. He loads a round into the gun. He then mentions the executioners. Sylvester explains that they are high-class vampires who were practically impossible to track before. Segun realizes that they are using the corrupted as bait. Sylvester confirms that this is exactly the case. He adds that for hunters who work for money it is a wonderful opportunity. He watches his phone that reports introduces itself as Vamplik Finder and welcomes the user, explaining that it is a source for the latest linked information. Segun looks and wonders what it is supposed to be. Sylvester tells him to stay quiet. The news then announces that it has a piece of information hotter than anything else right now, and that everyone must be eager to know it. The corrupted currently roaming soul has been identified as the former hunter Jong Jun. Sylvester quietly acknowledges that it is this one. He remarks that this situation is going to become a very cruel business for Song Diek.
Scene shifts. At a container yard at night, a group of men met beside a truck. A case filled with stacks of money was placed on the ground, and one of them told the other to check it out. A man named as Kenneth Yang crouched beside the case and examined the money. After a moment, Kenneth Yang, an arms dealer, decided that everything looked about right. He then opened the back of the truck while the others watched. Inside, a collection of rifles and other firearms was displayed on racks and shelves. Kenneth Yang closed the truck and commented that he would prefer they did not kill people out in the open if possible. They were guns after all. After a brief silence, Kenneth Yang got into the vehicle while the others remained nearby. The red-eyed man raised his gun and mocked Kenneth Yang as a stupid fool. He questioned why anyone would buy a gun if not to kill people. Kenneth Yang glanced back and warned him that it would be best not to do anything stupid. Standing beside the truck while several armed men surrounded him, he added that if someone got on a competent arms dealer's bad side, all the weapons they were holding would eventually become scrap metal. With a gun aimed at his back, Kenneth Yang calmly continued and wondered whether their Mosquito brothers had any long-term vision. The red-eyed man pressed the gun against Kenneth Yang and demanded to know if this was really the time to act so relaxed. He reminded him that the weapon was loaded and insulted him for being an idiot. Without turning around, Kenneth Yang pointed out that if a hole were blown through his head right now, they would have nowhere to get bullets in the future. The red-eyed man hesitated and lowered his weapon. Another man then claimed they had merely been joking. He remarked that a competent arms dealer was indeed different. He noted that Kenneth Yang remained completely calm even with a gun aimed at his back. Kenneth Yang pointed out something even more important. He remarked that a human trading with vampires was already fascinating enough on its own. The vampires listened as he continued that aiming a gun at an arms dealer was a thoroughly disagreeable matter. Leaning against the vehicle, Kenneth Yang paused in thought. He then raised his hand and flicked his fingers. Afterward, he casually announced that next time he would be charging a 10% surcharge and told them to keep that in mind. The red-eyed vampire stared at him and questioned what he meant by next time. A moment later, laughter broke out among the group, and one of them answered that he would keep that in mind. Kenneth Yang watched them leave, then let out a relieved breath. He muttered that the children of Hecate were ugly beyond compare. He rubbed his face and complained that those people truly had no manners, just as the rumors claimed. He felt that encounter had taken 10 years off his life. Scene shifts. As Songdeok drove away, he received a message saying, perhaps they had changed while hunting the Juk-Yi clan vampires. It could simply be a side effect of psychedelic moon. Everyone knew there was a bounty on that corruptor. He wondered why they cared so much about a corruptor that brought in no money, but it seemed they believed their very survival depended on it, and the reward was an enormous 100 million won. Thinking about it, Songdeok found the situation unbelievable. Vampires had placed a bounty on vampire hunters. He then remembered a piece of news. At the southern end of Yanghua Bridge, near Han River Park, a police officer's body had been found on the ground beside a patrol car. The report stated that the monster had appeared again. The terrifying creature with glowing red eyes stood among the wreckage and bodies. The news had only delivered the information, leaving the judgment to others. Meanwhile, the monster looked toward two vampires standing above. One wondered if the police can handle this creature. One remarked that even if this was a remote corner of the East, they should not underestimate the police of this country. The creature suddenly charged forward. The long-haired vampire moved and stopped it, telling it not so fast. At the same moment, countless red threads spread through the air and surrounded the battlefield. The threads struck the creature from every direction, cutting into its body and sending blood flying. The creature let out a painful scream as the attacks continued to tear through it. The long-haired vampire called out to Echelon and asked why he did not finish it. Instead, he suddenly shouted for Echelon to move. A sharp attack pierced through the long-haired man's body. Blood burst from the wound as he was thrown back and crashed onto the ground with a cry of pain. Echelon rushed to his fallen companion and demanded to know who had done it. The man smiled and remarked with surprise that Jukyo vampires were running wild, despite having no foothold in Korea. The battlefield came into view. The corrupted creature crouched on the ground while Echelon remained beside his injured companion. Police officers and armed personnel had arrived and surrounded the area. One of the armed men spoke. He said that capturing both the vampires and the corrupted at the same time was like killing two birds with one stone, and that the boss would be very pleased. Echelon glared at him and remarked that he had become obsessed with criticism. The man laughed and replied that it was still better than being obsessed with blood. Smiling, he added that perhaps they were not so different after all. Without warning, gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Dark, wing-like shadows burst forward as Echelon dodged through the barrage and rushed straight toward the attackers. The armed man raised his weapon, but Echelon reached him in an instant and struck. Blood sprayed across the air as the attack landed. Echelon glared at the man and told him to go to hell. The man grinned and said that he appreciated the passion, but asked if Echelon was underestimating humans a little too much. As Echelon charged forward, the man rushed to meet him and started cursing at him. More armed men raised their weapons and opened fire from every direction. Gunfire filled the area as bullets rained toward Echelon. Blood burst into the air when one of the attacks struck him. Explosions and continuous gunfire shook the battlefield, but the man watched calmly without concern. Later, another man laughed while holding a blood-filled container. He remarked that it had been a long time since he had seen a high-class vampire. The armed man carrying a rifle warned that since they were dealing with Jukyo's blood, they had better be careful not to ruin the goods. The armed man noticed something and looked up in confusion. In the distance, someone shouted for them to stop and leave that guy alone. The bald man turned toward the voice in surprise. Looking back at the creature, or say corrupted vampire lying on the ground, The bald man wondered why they would catch him. He explained that the man was currently nothing more than high-grade bait. The corrupted vampire remains sprawled on the blood-stained ground while the armed man says that even if they let him loose, the vampires would gather on their own. He added that settling for a measly 100 million would be a waste. He then asked for the transmitter and told someone to bring it to him. At that moment, the corrupted vampire suddenly moved and lunged forward at high speed. The man rushed through the air and crashed into the corrupted vampire, knocking him away. He grinned and wondered where he should stick it, asking if rumors would spread that he had put it in a good place. He immediately slammed into the corrupted vampire and drove the attack into his body. The corrupted vampire swung his body and knocked a man to the ground. Watching the scene, someone reacted with interest. The corrupted vampire landed on all fours and steadied itself. Seeing that, the man remarked that this was good and that he was still lively. The corrupted vampire then sprinted away into the distance along the riverside road, while the group watched him go. The man grinned and called everyone to move out. With the armed group gathered behind him, he declared that the night fishing was starting now. Later, several vehicles sped down the road at high speed. Inside one of the cars, the man suddenly noticed something ahead and wondered what it was. A large truck rolled forward, and several armed vampires stood on top of it, the same vampire that bought weapons from Kenneth Yang. Seeing them, the man's expression changed in alarm. He shouted for the driver to turn the car around immediately. A blonde vampire aimed a rocket launcher and fired. The rocket streaked across the road and slammed into the vehicles. A massive explosion erupted, engulfing the cars in flames and debris. One vehicle burst through the fire and continued forward while burning wreckage scattered behind it. As the attack continued, several armed vampires calmly advanced and opened fire. The highway became littered with wrecked and damaged vehicles as smoke and flames filled the area. The man ended up sitting on the ground beside a damaged vehicle. The vampire wondered what this was. The man sat against the overturned vehicle, while the vampire recognized the newcomer as the alchemist bastard's lackey. The blonde vampire stood before him, drank blood, and wondered why he had not seen him in the States. He questioned whether that man had come to Korea. The man glared at him and clicked his tongue, cursing the children of Hecate. Sitting beside the overturned vehicle, the man mocked the vampires and wondered since when vampires had become so weak that they needed heavy armor. As the vampire tightened his grip on the blood packet in his hand, he dismissed the idea of weakness and said it should be called preparedness. The blonde vampire crouched beside him and mentioned that people were saying the god demon hunter who killed Jokyo and Chongjin was in Korea. He added that coming to a country with someone like that while completely unarmed sounded much more entertaining. The man forced out a grin and thought that the blonde vampire had a point. The blonde vampire aimed the gun to the man's face and shot, then bared his fangs with a wide smile, ordered his men to search him because there had to be a tracking device. The others immediately searched the dead man and others. A device was found, displaying a map and a tracked location on its screen. A vampire checked the device and concluded that it was connected only to FM. Satisfied with that answer, the blonde vampire simply remarked that it was good. A grin spread across his face as he suggested having a quick midnight snack. Someone struck the vampire holding the device beside the overturned vehicle. Black blood burst from his head as he coughed and struggled. The blonde vampire stared at the scene in surprise and realized that cellular rounds had been used. An explosion erupted behind him. He quickly turned toward the source of the disturbance. Veins spread across his face as his expression hardened. He recognized the arrival of a true vampire hunter. Under the moonlight, Sylvester stood on a high point with a sword in hand and a gun on his shoulders, overlooking the battlefield. He looked down at the scene and remarked that they seemed to have many unwelcome guests today. And with this, we've come to the end of today's episode. If you stayed till the last second, drop your thoughts about this story, and in the comments, guess what our MC will do next. A quick like helps more than you think, and subscribing makes sure you never miss what comes next. Thank you for watching, and check out this video right here.